Test. All right. Hi, everybody. If there are more people coming in, continue to come in, but we're going to get started since we're late already. I am introducing Marc Prokosh, who is an immigration attorney here in Roseville. He did a forum last year during COVID. Some of you may have done it. It was a Zoom. So we've asked him to come back. He happens to be my boss also. And he's going to talk about, I believe, Haiti and Afghanistan. And then I can answer any questions y'all have. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me back, and it's fun doing these in person once again instead of over Zoom the last year and a half or so. So yes, my name is Marc Prokosh. I'm an immigration attorney locally. I'm actually a native of Roseville. I actually grew up just up the road at St. Adelia's, but then I married Ruth Sorensen Prokosh, the pastor that's been around in the Twin Cities. A lot of you may know her name as well. So yes, Rachel asked me to talk about immigration, and that's all the indicators that I got about what to speak about. So I guess that means I get to talk about whatever I want. So last year when I was with you guys on Zoom, I finished with a list of a few things that we might be expecting in the first 100 days of the new administration. And actually looking through my notes from last time, we got all of them. So yeah, so that was, we were suggesting that they might reinstate DACA, done. Repeal the Muslim ban, done. Repeal the public charge rule, done. 100-day freeze on deportations, mostly done. And wind down the private prison industry for immigration, mostly done. So it was a good first 100 days. So today I think most people probably want me to talk about things that have been in the news a lot recently, and that's going to be the Haitians that were on the border and others on the border, and also the situation with Afghans, and is there going to be any hope for anything major with immigration, like legalizing the Dreamers or things like that. So there's actually been a lot of rapidly moving news stories on immigration lately, and so I'll just run through some of those. I might refer to some of my notes. I had to print off a lot of things because our home internet had been down the last 48 hours, and so I had to run into the office and print a bunch of things off. So I'll just be referring to things that I wrote down here. So I'll start with the Afghan situation. We all know what's going on. We pulled out finally after 20 years. But over those 20 years, there were a lot of Afghans that had helped the U.S. Service people there with interpretation, just general knowledge, documentation, translation, things like that. And we kind of left in a hurry and left a lot of them behind. So let me just kind of walk you through what's going on because we see a lot of that in the news. While we did pull out about maybe 30,000 Afghans as we left, there are still tens of thousands in danger in that country that people are working on trying to help bring here. When we're talking about tens of thousands, I want to give you some of the statistics about here in Minnesota. The state of Minnesota has talked about that maybe 65 will come to Minnesota, and maybe another 200 of support people will also come. I think we can handle, that would be about 300 people coming to Minnesota. I think we can help them out. So there's a couple of different ways that we can bring those Afghan people here who have been helping the United States. The main one is what we call this special immigrant visa. It's been going on for a long time to have people be able to come on those special immigrant visas, but they are notoriously complicated, even for immigration standards. In fact, there have been comedians like Stephen Colbert that have mocked how difficult these are to process for these Afghans. We as a country, we made a promise to them because they helped us out. And we're just not fulfilling that promise. I'll give you an example of one of these special immigrant visas. So, like I said, Stephen Colbert had basically mocked how hard it is. Rachel and I are actually working on one right now for, it was the interpreter for a Minnesota Army individual. And it will tell you how difficult it is. We specialize in immigration, and it is taking 2 lawyers, a law student, and Rachel under the supervision of a federal magistrate judge, and we still can't figure it out. And if we can't figure it out, what's going to happen to those individuals that don't have that help? So, about a couple of months ago, the administration said, okay, well, instead of fixing that, we'll add another option for you guys. And so they said, we'll give you this possibility of parole. So instead of a visa, you can be paroled into the United States. So they created this parole program where you can come on parole and then we'll figure out your stuff here, okay? Let me tell you where that's at. So first of all, they created this parole program and it costs each Afghan $575 just to apply. But they said that, maybe we'll waive those fees if the circumstances is right. So we tried this for our gentleman, and you know what? They rejected our fee waiver. And actually, we've been hearing, Rachel doesn't even know this yet, because I just learned this in the last 48 hours. We've learned that almost every single fee waiver request has been rejected by the government. So every single Afghan that's applying for this parole is having to fork over $575 to apply for this program. So here's the numbers that I found just this weekend. There's actually been 17,000 of these applications submitted just in the last couple of months. That brings in to the US government almost $10 million to help process these. Do you know how many government officers there are working on those 17,000 that have now $10 million behind them? 6. And so actually, what we're hearing is not a single one has been completed. And so again, we create this promise, but we're not fulfilling it. Okay? I'll give you a quick example as a story about how we can, because what this comes down to is political will. It can be done. It has been done. We can do it. Back in the Iraq War in 1996, there was a similar kind of thing where something happened with Saddam Hussein's army that caught the U.S. Army flat-footed, and the U.S. Army had to pull back into Turkey. But then we had about 5,000 Kurds that were doing the same basic type of thing, Kurds that were helping the U.S. Army. And Turkey wouldn't let us bring those Kurdish helpers with us because Turkey and the Kurds have their own political problem, and we know how international politics goes. So somebody said in the US government who had enough clout to get it done, let's get them out of there. And so they took about 6,000 of those Kurds, loaded them onto those big C-130 cargo airplanes, and flew them to Guam. Presto, it was done. We can do it. We have the capability of doing it. We're just not doing it. And we're not fulfilling our promises to people that risk their lives for our US service members in Afghanistan. So it's frustrating, and usually when I have talks like these, people at the end say, well, what can we do? So on each of these 3 things that I'm going to be talking about, one of the things you can do is contact your representatives and say, we have a moral obligation to these people. Let's get it done. It can be done. So that's Afghanistan. Questions about Afghanistan before I'm here for you guys, so if you have questions, please ask. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. I'm a lawyer. I can talk as long as you'll let me. And so, yes?
Will the Afghan government, whoever's in charge, allow these people to leave, even if we manage to come up with ways to get them out?
That's actually an excellent question. The question is will the Afghan government allow these people to leave? And so far, yes. We don't know what's going to happen. See, the new Afghan government is the Taliban, right? They've kind of discovered that it was easy fighting to take over the country, but actually running a country is really hard. And so I don't think that they're going to really fight us taking some people out. They might actually be happy. But during that really fast transition, the Taliban actually had no problems with that first 30,000 that actually did leave. They had no problems with that. And they're trying to be a legitimate international government, and so I don't expect that they will really fight on that. So it's really more about, do we want to actually do it? Yeah.
And is that pretty much, in a simplified fashion, just because of the division of Democrats and Republicans that they can't get anything done? I mean, would it be the will of Biden?
Yes.
And it's just the divisions that are...
No, this is something that actually currently exists in law that is under the purview of the executive branch. So this does not have anything to do with infighting between Democrats and Republicans or Congress and the White House. This is purely executive office. So all it takes is somebody high enough to say, let's do it, and it'll get done. Yes? That's a good question. Oh, the question is, wouldn't this be in our interest to do it? And that's a good question. I'm going to leave that for smarter people than me to decide. I know my answer to that, and I think I know your answer to that. Yes, in the back.
Okay, you're saying we should contact our representatives, but it's an executive decision. That seems to be two different branches. Why talk to the one?
Why? That's also a good question. Why contact our representatives if I just said that this is an executive? It's political pressure. You know, again, what we need is we just need to build enough pressure to get this done. A very, very quick segue about how political pressure can actually get things done is I had mentioned this last time about the Liberians, and there have been there was enough political pressure over years and years and years that we have an obligation to the Liberian communities that finally enough pressure built that it got done. And interestingly, it was our own Senator Tina Smith that was one of the two lead authors of the bill. And so in immigration, it's very political, and so it takes that pressure to build. And so yes, even though it is an executive issue, the more that people know, because I mean, it's one thing for you to call the White House, which is 202-456-1414 if you want to know. It's easier to contact local representatives. Okay. I'm sorry? Yes, you could write letters to Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. The Secretary of Homeland Security is Alejandro Mayorkas, and the Secretary of State is Antony Blinken. All of those are people you can contact as well. Yes?
There's been very little about Afghanistan in the news lately, and I'm wondering about those who have helped the Americans and have not been able to get out, what their life is like. How much danger are they in under the Taliban?
So that's going to be mostly anecdotal, so I'll tell you the story of our guy that we basically call Z. He's got an Afghan name that starts with Z, so we just call him Z because we can't pronounce it completely. But we have very scattered contact with him because the infrastructure in the country has kind of collapsed, and so basically he has to travel in order to get to somewhere where there is enough internet access that he can contact his U.S. Army supporter to then contact us. And so his family he's currently okay as far as we can tell. but we don't really know. And so again, we're basically just watching the news just like you. Even though we're working with a specific individual, we're basically just kind of watching the news as far as how safe these individuals are. And again, it comes back to, what is the Taliban going to do now that they are the actual government? Are they going to try to govern, or are they going to continue what they had been doing for the past 20-some years? We don't know. We don't know what the future is going to bring for that. And so ultimately, it shouldn't matter because we have this moral obligation to these people, and so let's just work on getting them out of there. I'm going to switch over now to the Haitians. We've all heard about the Haitians that have been coming to the border, and it's actually not just Haitians, it's going to be anybody traveling through Central America to come to the United States to apply for asylum. It's funny, I was talking with Ruth this morning about, is there something going on with you all here that I can try to bring all of this in? Usually I'll look at the scriptures for the day to see if there's some immigration context, but there really wasn't today. But then I heard somebody during announcements talk about your partner church in Guatemala. That's the Northern Triangle. That's where most of the refugees currently are coming from. So Haiti was in the news, but it's still also the Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. There's a lot going on in those countries as far as environmental disasters, international gangs, and other issues that are making it difficult for them to live, that they literally are fleeing their own homes to make this several 100-mile journey up to the United States just for the chance of asking for asylum, knowing that 80% or so of asylum applicants get denied anyway. So, I'm not going to get too much into what the previous administration did because I think we all kind of know. A few things that have helped is there have been some rules that have been repealed, but the one, and this was one of the ones that I've been frustrated with, and again, this is going to come back to when at the end when people say, what can I do? Is there's something that was put in place last year that was prohibiting any asylum seeker from even applying for asylum at the border because of COVID. It's called Title 42. It's basically a health initiative. It actually came out of the political branch of the White House. It did not come out of the Centers for Disease Control or the Department of Health. It came out of the political branch because the previous administration was looking for any way to deny anybody to come to the United States to apply for asylum. Problem is, it's still in place. The current administration has not repealed that. And so we're still using Title 42 under the guise of preventing people with infectious diseases from entering the United States to stop them from coming and applying for asylum. So of the tens of thousands, I don't know, I don't have the exact number, but of the tens of thousands of people that have been coming to the United States to apply for asylum, there's only been about, I think it's about 3,000 that have even been allowed to apply. And remember, applying for asylum is a right. It is in the Geneva Conventions. It's in our laws. If you come to a border patrol station and say, I want to apply for asylum because I'm afraid if I go back home I'm going to be murdered, you have a right to that. But we've been using Title 42 since March of last year to prevent almost all people coming to the United States from even asking for asylum. And that's where the Haiti issue comes in. We all know what's been going on in Haiti. There's been natural disaster after natural disaster, and then their president was assassinated, and we could go on and on and on. And so it turned out that there were about 3,000 Haitians that got together and came to the US border to ask for asylum. And a few weeks ago, we just deported them all to Haiti, and we didn't even allow them. And that's not so much the asylum rules anymore, because the current administration did repeal the asylum rules that was preventing that. it's using Title 42 to prevent them from coming. We've noted that just within the past couple of weeks, the administration has said, okay, now that most people are getting vaccinated, tourists can come to the United States again. You know, so Canadians can come and visit and spend money. Mexicans with visas can come and visit, but they did not take away that from asylees. So we're still facing this issue with asylees not being able to come to the United States to apply for asylum under the guise of public health. Even though it wasn't a public health decision, it was a political decision, and we haven't stopped that. Let me see where I'm at on that then too. So, questions about that so far? No, good. Then I'm going to keep going here. Rachel, how much time do I have, just so I know how long I can talk? As long as I want? Okay. If you all start kind of wandering out, then I'll know that it's time for me to be done. Yep. Okay. So then I'm going to move on then to what's going to happen with Congress. There were a couple people that mentioned, you know, if this is executive, what about Congress? Because we have this possibility of immigration reform, because we have so many people that are undocumented or of, you know, gray area immigration status. Everybody talks about the Dreamers as the big key group for people that should be legalized. The last time, if you were on Zoom last year, I kind of gave you like a brief history of immigration law in about 4 minutes. And the last major immigration bill was in 1996. And I'm going to circle back to why that's important in a moment. So now that we have one party nominally in control of all of both the legislative and the executive branch, people have been saying, can't we get an immigration bill passed and we can legalize the Dreamers? And here's where things are at. The reconciliation bill is where things are getting hung up with. In the original, does everybody understand what I mean when I'm talking about the reconciliation bill? That's Biden's infrastructure bill, the one that has to go through, that gets to avoid the filibuster. So, in the initial proposal for that, there was a pretty broad legalization in the proposed bill where the Dreamers would get legalized. Dreamers and farm workers and a couple of other groups. But the Senate parliamentarians said that it was more policy than budget related, and so said that it wouldn't be allowed to be in reconciliation, which means that it would have to get passed through normal means, which means that the Senate Republicans could filibuster it, which means they probably will. So there's been a lot of negotiations about, okay, then what can we include in this reconciliation bill that will actually pass? And it's kind of disappointing that it's come down to that there's really only two things. One is something really esoteric called visa recapturing, which I'll explain in a moment so you understand. And the other is expanding parole, because remember I just told you about with the Afghans, one of the options was parole. So the parole is kind of a backdoor if you're in the United States to getting legalized. So if you are undocumented and you have the opportunity to pay that $575, you could get parole, which might give you this backdoor to legalization. The visa recapturing is the more interesting one for us. And basically what it would do is it would speed up people who are already being sponsored to getting their visas. If I talked about this, or if you've heard about this, sometimes politicians will always talk about people need to wait their turn in line to get their green card or their legal status, right? Thing is there's not just one line, there's like 25 lines. Some of them are as short as a year, some of them are as long as, what's Philippine F4 at? It's like 25 years. And so here's what that all means, is in that 1996 bill, that the last immigration bill, they said we will give out this number of green cards to people who have been sponsored by family or businesses, and that's it, okay? And I think the number is about 120-some thousand green cards a year. But here's the thing. We all know immigration is not exactly quick in doing things. So at the end of each government year, not all of them get used up. So say, in 2020, Congress said we can give out 120,000, but they only finished like 100. And so then there's these 20,000 left over. They don't get to carry over into the next year. They get thrown away. Okay? So think about from 1996 to now, 10 to 20,000 cases that Congress did authorize, and these are people who have already been sponsored by either family or businesses. 10 to 20,000 a year just get thrown away. And so visa recapture, if you can imagine this, is exactly that, is we get to say, you know what, we already authorized them, so we're gonna go and recapture them. So 10 to 20,000 over 25 years, that's a lot of people, again, that have already been sponsored. We were just talking, if you, let's see here, somebody pick a country for me. Any country. Mexico. Okay, so if you are from Mexico and you are sponsoring your, should we say brother? Okay, so if you're from Mexico and you're sponsoring your brother, it is a 23-year wait before your brother can come. But if we get these visa recapture numbers, that 23 might get cut in half. Or if you are a business person and you want to sponsor your IT specialist from India, who got their master's degree probably even at the University of Minnesota, you have to wait 10 years for that person. That might get cut into 2 to 3 years. So even though we're disappointed that we can't get the Dreamers this time, this might help. And again, coming back to what do we do at the end of all of this, it's call Congress and say, why can't you legalize the Dreamers? Because people know what who the Dreamers are, correct? They're the people that came to the U.S. as children and have been here ever since. Also, by definition, they are non-criminals and they have gone through U.S. schools. They're basically your co-workers, your friends, your neighbors. They're as American as you or I. It's just that they were born on the other side of a line that was drawn by somebody 100 or 200 years ago. That's the only difference there. So that's the next step for us, is to get those Dreamers legalized. I think that's it for what is going on now with the potential for immigration reform. We always talk about can we do it? Here's the thing about when the parliamentarians said it's not budget related. All of us, it's not like a net zero thing. These people will create jobs and then allow people to create businesses. It's a growth thing. So how it won't help the budget is kind of strange. It was an interesting discussion to find out that the Senate parliamentarian that said that it wasn't sufficiently budget related was previously an ICE trial attorney, which means that yes, she did actually actively try to deport people, and now she's the one that's saying that it's not sufficiently budget related and you can't have immigration reform. I think that's most of what I have. Questions so far? Otherwise, I can just talk and tell stories and answer all of your questions. Rachel?
Can't Vice President Harris go override that?
Yes. Question was, can Kamala Harris override the Senate parliamentarian? And yes. The question is will she? Yeah. So again, there's your activism, is go and try to persuade. And the reason for that is the vice president is the president of the Senate under the U.S. Constitution. And so she is technically under our Constitution in charge of the Senate, so she gets to make the final call on everything.
So we should all be contacting her about that.
Yep, yes, you could all be contacting Vice President Harris and say, you know, come on. Yes,
Question back on the Haitian situation.
yes.
I understood from reading the newspaper, hearing the news, that a lot of those Haitians, or some of the Haitians, I don't know how many, were actually coming through other countries where they had lived for years. Did we end up sending back people to Haiti who had been living in Central America or somewhere for years?
The question for people in the back was news reports were saying that these Haitians had actually, some of them, been living in third countries for a few years because they probably fled Haiti during the last earthquake, which I think was 2015, if I remember correctly. And are we then deporting them directly back to Haiti? And unfortunately, the answer is yes. We were chartering flights directly to, we were taking them from our border patrol stations on the US-Mexico border, bringing them into prison facilities so that then we could get a charter plane and fly them back to Haiti. So yes, because technically under international law, we could not deport somebody from one country to another country, even though we've done it before. So yes, we were deporting them directly back to Haiti.
This seems so awful.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Yes, often when you do your letters, there are letters already out there that have the terminology and the correct, the correct way to write it.
Mm-hmm.
Are there talk points when you're writing these letters for us to use? And how, if there are, where would they be?
So the question is, when you want to write these letters or contact these people, how do you use the proper terminology and where to go? I can make sure that Rachel gets this information to your newsletter or whatnot, as far as a couple of good places. My number one source for something like that would be the American Immigration Council, which I think is just americanimmigrationcouncil.org. They're an advocacy organization that's actually pretty well funded, and they help that type of activism. Otherwise, any other good organization like ACLU probably would, or locally Immigrant Law Center, or the Advocates for Human Rights, or what am I thinking here? Amnesty International. Most of those would have good resources. But Rachel, let's get that to you.
And also, the ELCA has.
Yeah, that was my question, was Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, would that
Is-
also be?
Yes, totally. And they have, actually somebody, I feel like Missy Albright has sent out before links to those, and they're awesome. They're super easy, and they say exactly what you want to say for you.
Yeah.
And you can literally click on a link and then sign your name and send it off.
Great.
So, you can read.
That's
it.
really helpful.
It's super helpful.
Yeah.
Because
Amparo is another ELCA sub-organization that is doing a lot of work, and that's what AMP, I don't remember exactly how to spell, but Amparo is another ELCA organization, sub-organization that works on that. Lutheran Social Services is probably another. So yes, did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Other questions? Otherwise, I think I've filled up my hour here, so you guys can all get a little more coffee or cookies or cake, or pie, not cake. I'll hang out for a few more minutes in case anybody has any additional questions. Otherwise, Rachel and I will get you some of that information about best resources for contacting. And two other things, last minute things about what can you do is, number one, always vote. And number two, if the administration is using Title 42, then make sure that all of us get vaccinated, and so that they no longer have the justification of public health if we can defeat this pandemic. But with that, thank you.